I sent a text to the family group chat 3 days after my hip replacement surgery, asking if anyone could come pick me up from St. Augustine Medical. My daughter replied, "Mama's got a dance recital tonight, Dad. Just get a lift." That was the last message anyone sent me for 6 hours. I want to tell you what happened after that, because I promised myself a long time ago that I would never lie to the people who listened to my stories. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I am 68 years old. I spent 38 years laying brick and block for a construction outfit on the south side of Atlanta, and I raised 2 children in a house I built with my own 2 hands, plank by plank, brick by brick, on Willowbrook Lane. This is the story of what my son and his wife did to me the week I came home from surgery, and what happened after. Because a man who has poured concrete for 4 decades knows one thing better than anybody. Everything you build on a bad foundation eventually comes down. The hip had been bothering me for 2 years. I told my son Darnell it was nothing, just an old man's aches, because that's what you do when you don't want to be a burden. But by the spring, it got so bad I couldn't climb the porch steps without gripping the rail like my life depended on it. And eventually the doctor said the joint was bone on bone and I needed a full replacement or I'd be in a wheelchair by Christmas. Darnell drove me to the hospital the morning of the surgery. He held my hand in the pre-op room and said, "You're going to be all right, Pop. I got you." I believed him. I had raised that boy myself after his mother passed, cooked his dinners, coached his little league team, paid for his associate's degree at Georgia Perimeter when the scholarship money ran short. I believed him because I had given that boy every reason in the world to show up for me. The surgery went fine. 4 days in recovery, and on the 5th morning the physical therapist cleared me to go home, as long as somebody was there to help me the first few nights. Since I couldn't put full weight on the leg yet, and I was still woozy from the anesthesia and the pain medication. I sent the text at 11 in the morning. "Can somebody come get me? Doctor says I'm cleared." I sat in that vinyl recliner by the window, and I watched the message get delivered, then read, and then nothing. I watched an elderly Korean woman 2 beds down get wheeled out by her granddaughter, who had brought a wheelchair cushion from home and a thermos of soup. I watched a young father get discharged after a knee scope, his wife waiting with a folding wheelchair and a balloon that said "Welcome home." And I sat there in my hospital gown, my hip wrapped and throbbing, waiting on my own children, like a man waiting on a bus that wasn't coming. At 2 in the afternoon, my daughter Renee finally answered. "Mama's got a dance recital tonight, Dad. Just get a lift." Renee was 31, married to a man named Tobias who worked in insurance claims and never had 2 words for me at Thanksgiving. I called Darnell directly. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I texted him, "Please, son, I can't drive myself, and I'm not supposed to be alone the first night." 20 minutes later, he wrote back, "Pop, I'm in the middle of something at the house. Just call a cab. We'll see you tonight." I read that message maybe 6 times. Like if I stared at it long enough, the words would rearrange themselves into something kinder. I thought about the nights I sat up with that boy when he had the croup, how I drove 45 minutes each way every Sunday for 2 years to bring him to his mother's grave because he said he needed to talk to her, how I co-signed the loan on his first car and never once asked for $1 back. And now he was in the middle of something at the house, and I was sitting in a wheelchair with a 9-inch incision in my hip, alone. A nurse named Priscilla came by to check my vitals and saw me still sitting there past the discharge window. She had kind eyes, the kind that have seen too much and stayed soft anyway. "Is somebody coming for you, Mr. Whitfield?" she asked, and I heard the pity underneath the professionalism. And pity was the one thing in this world I could not stand. "They're on their way," I told her, which was the first lie I told that day, though it would not be the last thing I had to swallow. She told me about a senior transport voucher program the hospital worked with for patients without family support, and something in my chest cracked wide open at those words, "without family support," because I had 2 grown children with cars and gas money and free afternoons, and somehow I still qualified as a man without family support. I told her no thank you, and I called for a taxi myself. The driver's name was Emmanuel, an older Nigerian man with a rosary hanging from his mirror and forearms like coiled rope from 20 years behind a wheel. He helped me into the back seat with more gentleness than my own son had shown me in a phone call, and when I told him where I needed to go, he asked if I was hurting, and when I said some, He turned the air conditioning down and drove slower over every bump like he was carrying something precious. In my country, he said, glancing at me in the mirror, when a father is sick, the children argue over who gets to sit with him. It is an honor, not a duty. I do not understand this place sometimes. I didn't say anything. I just looked out the window at Atlanta rolling by, at families walking together in the summer heat, and I felt something colder than the air conditioning settle into my bones. We hit traffic on Cascade Road, backed up for almost a mile because of construction, the kind of gridlock that makes a man's bladder start talking to him. I asked Emmanuel to pull into a gas station so I could use the restroom and grab a bottle of water, since my mouth had gone dry as chalk from the pain pills. He didn't want me walking alone, but I told him I'd been walking on my own two legs since before his mother was born, and he laughed and let me go, though I could see him watching me the whole way in the side mirror. Inside, the gas station clerk was a young man with tired eyes, watching a small television propped behind the register. I grabbed my water and a roll of antacids, because the pain medication was murder on my stomach, and while I stood in line, I noticed the lottery machine humming in the corner. My late wife Corinne used to play the Georgia lottery every single Friday. Same 5 numbers, our anniversary date, and the address of the first house we ever rented together. She used to say, "Marcus, it's not about winning. It's about believing something good is still coming." She'd been gone 4 years, taken by a stroke on a Tuesday morning while she was making coffee, and I still couldn't walk past a lottery machine without hearing her voice. "Give me 1 Mega Millions," I told the clerk. Same numbers every time. 4, 17, 22, 31, and 9. He punched it in, the machine spat out the ticket, and I folded it into my shirt pocket, right over my heart, right over the place where Corinne used to rest her hand when she hugged me. That was when the bell above the door rang hard, too hard, and 2 men in hoods came in fast, one of them already pulling a pistol from his waistband. "Everybody down now, empty the register," he shouted, and the clerk's hands shot up so fast he knocked over a display of scratch-offs. I was standing by the coolers, near the back, and for a moment I thought about just lowering myself to the floor like a sensible 68-year-old man with a brand new hip should do. But the second man, younger, jittery, spotted me standing there and pointed. "Old man, get down!" I said get down. And something about the way he said old man, the same dismissive way my own son had said it in my head all day without ever using those words, lit something in me that the pain medication hadn't touched. I want to be honest with you. I did not plan what happened next. I have laid brick for 38 years, and my hands know how to move a heavy thing with very little effort if the leverage is right. That's the whole secret of the trade. It was never about strength, it was about angles. When the younger one stepped toward me to shove me down, I grabbed the wire display rack of newspapers beside me and swung it into his knees, and he went down screaming, and the gun in his partner's hand swung toward the noise. I didn't think about my hip. I didn't think about the incision or the anesthesia still thick in my blood. I threw the only thing in my hand, that bottle of water, straight at the gunman's face, and in the half-second he flinched, I closed the distance and drove my forearm into his throat the way we used to break up fights on job sites 30 years ago, pinning him against the cigarette rack until the clerk vaulted the counter and knocked the gun from his hand. The whole thing lasted maybe 11 seconds. When the police arrived, they found me sitting on an overturned milk crate, gray in the face, sweat soaking through my shirt, one hand pressed against my new hip, which was screaming at me in a language I understood perfectly. A local news van happened to be 2 blocks away covering the break-in story, and within 20 minutes, there was a reporter with a microphone asking me how a man, 4 days out of hip surgery, had taken down 2 armed robbers. I didn't take anybody down. I told her, I just didn't feel like getting on the floor today. That line ended up being the one they played on the 10 o'clock news, over a photo of me being helped into the ambulance for observation, my shirt pocket still bulging with that folded lottery ticket. Emmanuel drove me the rest of the way home once the paramedics cleared me, refusing to take a dime extra for the wait. When we pulled up to Willowbrook Lane, the porch light was off, and there was a car in the driveway that wasn't mine, wasn't Darnell's either. I knocked, because for some reason my key didn't turn, and after a long minute, the door opened, and there was Darnell, and behind him, his wife Simone, and behind her, boxes. Not my boxes. New furniture boxes, a television box taller than Simone herself, still wearing the plastic film. "Pop," Darnell said, and there was no shame in his voice, only mild inconvenience, the same tone you'd use with a delivery driver who showed up early. "We didn't think you'd be back tonight." The recliner's in the middle of getting delivered. I looked past him into my own living room, the room where Corinne and I had raised 2 children, and there was a sectional couch I had never seen before. Price tag still dangling off the arm, and a box for an 85-inch television leaning against the wall I had built myself, stud by stud, in 1989. "Whose furniture is that?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be, because the shock of it had knocked the wind clean out of a man who'd just fought off 2 armed robbers without losing his breath. Simone answered before Darnell could open his mouth. "We figured since you were going to be laid up a while, we'd finally fix this place up." "It's been looking old, Marcus." She had never once, in 9 years of marriage to my son, called me anything but Marcus. Not Dad, not Pop, not Mr. Whitfield, just Marcus, like I was a landlord she tolerated. "You should probably stay with your sister a few weeks anyway while you heal. Steps aren't good for your hip." "We'll take care of everything here." I stood in my own doorway, on a leg that had just been rebuilt with titanium, having just walked away from a gun pointed at my chest, and I understood in that moment that my son and his wife had already begun rearranging my house around my absence, as though I were furniture being replaced rather than the man who paid for every square foot of it. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I told them I was tired, and I asked Emmanuel, who had waited in the driveway the whole time, without me asking him to, if he could take me to a motel on Camp Creek Parkway for the night. He didn't ask a single question. He just opened the door. I lay in that motel bed with the television on low, watching my own face on the 11 o'clock news, a headline underneath reading "Local Grandfather Foils Armed Robbery Days After Surgery," and my phone was silent the entire time, because my children didn't know yet, and somehow that felt like the loneliest thing that had happened to me all day. Lonelier than the hospital, lonelier than the empty driveway. I took the lottery ticket out of my shirt pocket, smoothed the wrinkles out of it against the motel comforter, and I looked at those 5 numbers, Corinne's numbers, and for the first time in a long while I said a real prayer, not asking God for money, just asking him to help me figure out what kind of man I wanted to be for whatever years I had left. The numbers came in that Friday. All 5 of them, Corinne's 5 numbers, on a Mega Millions jackpot that had rolled over 11 times. I did not scream. I did not cry out. I sat alone in that motel room with the ticket in my trembling hands, and I laughed, quiet and disbelieving, the kind of laugh that comes out when your whole body doesn't know whether to grieve or celebrate. $91 million. Before taxes. I thought about Corinne's voice telling me it was never about the money. It was about believing something good was still coming, and I understood for the first time in 4 years exactly what she meant. I did not tell my children. Not that week. Not that month. I hired a lawyer named Gregory Okafor out of Buckhead, a careful, quiet man who specialized in estates and trusts, and together we built something I never in my life imagined I would need to build. A wall of paper between my money and my own blood. I claimed the jackpot anonymously through a trust, the way Georgia law allows if you set it up right, and I moved into a modest but comfortable townhome across town, telling Darnell and Renee only that I was staying with a cousin in Marietta while my hip finished healing and while I decided what to do about the house. The house on Willowbrook Lane, I want you to understand, was never in Darnell's name. Corinne and I bought that lot in 1988, poured the foundation ourselves with the help of 3 men from my crew, and the deed had my name on it and mine alone, since the day the county recorder stamped it. Darnell and Simone had been living there 4 years, rent-free, ever since Darnell lost his job at the logistics company and told me he just needed 6 months to get back on his feet. 6 months turned into 4 years, and somewhere in there they had stopped seeing it as my house. I was generously letting them stay in, and started seeing it as their house, that I was inconveniently still alive to occupy. 3 weeks after the robbery, Gregory filed the paperwork. Not an eviction out of cruelty, I want to be clear about that, because I am not a cruel man, and this is not a story about revenge for its own sake. I gave them 90 days, more than the law required, and I gave them a written offer. I would forgive 4 years of back rent, valued fairly at local market rates, an amount that came to just over $60,000, in exchange for them vacating peacefully and returning my house keys. Darnell called me 11 times in one afternoon when the notice arrived. I let every call go to voicemail, the way his calls had gone to mine on discharge day, except I listened to every single message, because unlike him, I wanted to know what my child had to say to me. The first messages were angry. How could I do this to my own son, after everything? Didn't family mean anything to me anymore? By the sixth message, Simone had gotten on the phone, her voice gone syrupy and soft in a way I hadn't heard since their wedding day, telling me they were sorry. They didn't realize they'd been under a lot of stress. Could we talk about this like adults? By the 11th message, it was Darnell again, and his voice had finally cracked open into something that sounded like the boy I remembered, the one who used to cry into my shoulder at his mother's funeral. Dad, please. I don't have anywhere else to go. I know I messed up. Please just call me back. I called him back. I want you to know that. I am not a man who enjoys watching his own child suffer, whatever he has done. I told him the truth. All of it. The ticket, the number, the trust, the lawyer, everything. Because I did not want him hearing it secondhand from a cousin or reading it in some county filing. There was a long silence on the line, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. And then he said, very quietly, "You've had that money for 2 months, and you let us think you were broke and staying with a cousin." And I said, "Son, you let me sit in a hospital lobby for 6 hours after major surgery and told me to call a cab. I think we're square on secrets." He moved out on schedule, into a small apartment on the west side, with Simone, the $60,000 of forgiven, rent the only cushion they had. Since it turned out, the new furniture, the 85-inch television, all of it had been bought on credit cards, already stretched thin from years of living beyond a salary Darnell hadn't actually earned in 4 years. Simone left him 9 months later, when the credit card companies started calling her job direct. I heard through my sister, who still talks to Renee, that Darnell is working construction now, my old trade, laying block for a company 2 rungs down from the one I retired from, coming home every night with dust in the creases of his knuckles the way I used to. I think about that a lot. My father used to say, a man doesn't really understand the value of a dollar until he's earned one with his own 2 hands after losing everything he didn't earn. Renee, my daughter, took it differently. She called me crying the week the story broke in the family, not angry like her brother, just ashamed, saying she never should have told me to just get a lift, that she'd thought about that moment every day since, replaying it, wondering why something so small in the moment had felt so enormous to carry afterward. I forgave her faster than I forgave Darnell, if I'm honest. Maybe because she came to me first, or maybe because a father's heart just bends easier toward a daughter who says she's sorry and means it. She and her husband Tobias come to see me now, every other Sunday, and she brings her little girl, my granddaughter Aaliyah, who has started calling me Poppy Marcus and doesn't know a single thing about lottery tickets or trust funds, only that her grandfather takes her to the park and lets her pick out too much candy at the corner store. I still live modestly, if you're wondering. I did not buy a mansion or a yacht or a fleet of cars. I bought a paid-off townhome with a small garden out back, where I grow tomatoes the way Corinne used to, and I put the rest of the money into a foundation in her name, the Corinne Whitfield Trade Scholarship, which pays full tuition for young men and women in Fulton County who want to learn a trade: bricklaying, electrical work, plumbing, the kind of work that built this country, with nobody's name on a building afterward. I read the applications myself, every quarter. Last month, I approved a 19-year-old girl from College Park who wants to become a master electrician, and I wrote on her acceptance letter, in my own hand, "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for working with your hands, because those hands will outlast every excuse anyone ever gave you for not showing up." Darnell texts me now and then. Short messages, nothing demanding, mostly just checking in. How's the hip? How's the garden? Saw Aaliyah's dance recital pictures. She's getting so big. I answer him now. Not because I've forgotten what that first day felt like, sitting alone in that hospital lobby with my life in a plastic bag on my lap, but because I decided a long time ago, watching Corinne live and die with more grace than I ever thought a person could hold, That bitterness is just another kind of bad foundation. And I have laid enough of those in my life to know better than to build anything else on top of one. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. Love your family, but don't confuse blood for loyalty, because they are not always the same thing. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can start building something solid with whoever actually shows up for you. I sat in a hospital lobby waiting for people who didn't come, and it took a stranger with a rosary on his mirror to remind me what it looked like when somebody actually cared whether I made it home safe. Pay attention to the people who show up. Build your house on that ground, and nothing anybody does to you afterward will ever be able to tear it down. Showing up matters more than sharing blood. A jackpot didn't change who Marcus was. It just gave him the freedom to see clearly who'd been standing beside him all along, and who hadn't. Don't wait for a windfall or a crisis to notice the people who actually show up for you. Thank them today, out loud, and let that quiet gratitude be the strongest foundation you ever build. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely to entertain, while hopefully leaving you with a genuine, positive lesson to carry into your day.